Welcome to this presentation about Blender. This is the agenda. First, I will talk about what Blender is, how it works, and so on for about 15 minutes. I will demo how it works, and finally, with your participation, there will be a workshop. We will hopefully complete a 3D printable model. And I rather this be a dialogue than a monologue. So any questions you have, fire them anytime you want. I actually forgot to purchase the rewards this time, so come again tomorrow and there will be rewards, hopefully. If you want to follow along, everyone have Blender installed or not, you should just download the latest version. If you have an old version, that's probably fine too. Right, let's start with what is Blender? We'll let Blender answer that itself by quoting the Blender mission statement. Provide individual artists and small teams with a complete, free and open source 3D creation pipeline. But what does that mean? It doesn't cost anything. You can use it for both personal and commercial projects. It doesn't cost anything. You can do almost anything with it. And it aims to cover everything that you can possibly do with 3D. Of course, modeling and sculpting. Blender is not much of a CAD tool. You model items that are going to look good. You can model organic meshes, creatures and trees and landscapes, but also hard surface objects. But it's not a CAD tool. When you have your items, you can give them texture and material properties, such as shininess and normal maps. You can simulate hair, you can simulate cloth, smoke, fire, fluids, solid physics, and so on. You can, of course, render. Blender's main purpose is to make 3D animated movies. You can animate with it. So when you have done a character, you can let it walk around in the scene. When you're done with the rendering, you can composite it, change the lighting and change the colors. And you can use Blender for virtual effects. That is mixing real live footage with rendered objects. Like you can make your own Terminator 2 movie. And it's not very hard. But what about 3D printing? That's why we are here, right? So we have the modeling and the sculpting. The difference between modeling for animation and modeling for 3D printing is that the model should be watertight, manifold with 3D printing, and that is an extra challenge. But Blender can do it. Sculpting, it's very good with sculpting. There are other applications that are more specialized for sculpting, and they probably are a bit better, but Blender is very good too. It, of course, has the STL export built into it, It has a 3D printing add-on, and it's bundled in the download. You just have to go into the settings and enable it. Not everyone uses it. So the 3D printing add-on is for doing quality checks on your models. Is it manifold? Are there intersecting geometry? That kind of things are bad when you try to 3D print a model. There is the remesh modifier. When importing meshes from other applications such as games, there are sometimes dirty meshes, and remesh can try to clean it up. We have Boolean operations, very good when you want to take several different meshes and combine them into one whole watertight mesh. We have the decimate modifier, very good when you have very complex geometry and you want to reduce the complexity without losing the details. So you can reduce the number of polygons and have virtually the same model. You can, of course, reduce the number very much, and then you will only have the rough shape. But it's a setting you can use. So if Blender is free and open source and nobody has to pay, how can it work? The Blender Foundation is a non-profit organization. It's Dutch, and it's their mission to evolve Blender. They work with donations, and right now they have started a project for the 2.8 version of Blender. It's going to be really good. And also they make open movies. More on that later. But they sell DVDs with the open movies. There is a huge community. Since it's open source, I think there is about 1,000 developers on Blender. Of course, not everyone write code every day, but sometimes. And there is a lot of different communities and forums to make this work. There is a question and answer site, very good support. And there is a ton of tutorials on YouTube. Right, the open movies. Ton Rosenthal, the creator or original creator and founder of Blender, he really wants the application to be useful for the artists. So the open movies is a tool for that. You gather a group of developers and gather a group of artists, and they make a short movie, and the developers really enhance Blender in some ways to make it work for those artists making that movie. For instance, one open movie was about virtual effects, mixing real life footage with rendered objects. We'll see that in a second. The latest one is Alien 327, Operation Barbershop. It's on YouTube. It's a very fun movie. You might recognize this one. It's 10 years old, so I think it's aged quite good. Big Buck Bunny. Sintel, about a girl and her dragon, 8 years ago. Tears of Steel. This is a typical example of virtual effects. The girl and the other character is a young man and are real, but the mechanical arm that she holds him with is rendered objects. And all this is, of course, animated. Cosmos Laundromat. Strange movie, very, very beautiful. It's about a sheep having trouble in life. And the latest here is Operation Barbershop. We'll show just a few seconds from it. This is also a Wi-Fi test. So it's professional artists doing this, but it's really nice that you can make this kind of stuff with a free program. There are lots and lots of communities around Blender. This is just the tip of the iceberg. On the news site, Blender Nation, you can every day read about new tutorials that are posted on YouTube. If you use Blender and have a question about something, the blender.stackexchange.com is very helpful. BlendSwap is a place where you can look for free objects to use. Right. Another reminder to prepare for the workshop. Now it's time for the demo. Any questions? Let's get started. Right, so this is the default view of Blender. The GUI is dynamic. You can change everything. Let's change this into another 3D view, or let it be the outliner again. This big window here is the 3D view. This is where you've done most of the work. This is the outliner where you list your current objects. You can select objects in here. Let's make this a bit bigger. This is the properties windows. Everything you select in here is reflected in some of the tabs here. You can also change the scene and render it. So all the little details about everything, you're probably going to change them here. This down here is a timeline. If you're going to use animation, you can keep it. Otherwise, you can get rid of it so that your 3D viewport is bigger. This here is the default cube. This is the default start state of the application. I can rotate the view around it using the middle mouse button. I press it and rotate. If I hold down Shift, I can pan around. Also, using the mouse wheel, you can zoom in and out. If I get lost, I can use the numeric keyboard to navigate to different views. So now I view the scene from the front, from the left, and from the top. If I get lost and want to find a specific object, say I have lots of them, I can select the one I want to see. I can select it out here, and I can press the dot on the numeric keyboard to focus on it. And let's find the camera. There it is. Let's delete those. This here is the object mode. An object is typically a character, a piece of furniture, or the model you're working on to 3D print it. You can move it around. You can rotate it. You can scale it. There are keyboard shortcuts for everything in Blender. So it's very flexible, but you have to learn. If you want to use these handles, that's okay too. But press G to grab the object and move it around. Press R to rotate, and S to scale. Every time I do something with these commands, I can also press X, Y, or Z to restrict the operation along that axis. So X to move it along the X-axis, Y to move it along the Y-axis, and Z to move it up and down. That also works for rotation. This is unrestricted. But if I press X, you will see that I rotate around the X-axis. Also works with scaling. But if I really want to change how this object looks, let's go into edit mode. We can change it here, edit mode. Now I have the vertex selection mode. I can move individual vertices in the same way as I moved the object before by pressing the G key. I can shift click and select many of them. And of course, rotate them just around the Y-axis. Let's make something a bit more interesting than this. I have switched to face selection mode. Select these four. I inset them. I select these two. And I use the bridge edge loops command. Now I have a hole through it. I add some edge loops on the inside. I just press Ctrl R. I scroll the mouse wheel to increase or decrease. Now I have some more geometry in here. I can select that, and use the bridge command again, and the same here. slightly more interesting. I use the tab command to quickly switch between edit mode and object mode. I just press tab. So if I have several objects like this, I must select the one I want to edit. Now this one is selected. I press tab. I can edit this one, but I can't touch the other objects. So if you can split your model into multiple objects to work with them, that might be handy, but then you may have a hard time printing them afterwards because they're separate objects. I really should add them together before printing them, if they're going to be one whole mesh. Let's look up here. We have the modifiers, this wrench here. Let's add a subdivision modifier. A bit strange. Now you see what this is. This modifier makes the model rounder. The thing with modifiers is that it doesn't destroy the model you have. I can press the eye icon here, so it's hidden. I can remove it. I have my old item, my old object back again. I can continue to work with my original mesh. And it's immediately reflected in the object after the modifier. I can, if I want to, apply this. By applying it, the edits will become final. I can't go back after that. So now, if I go into edit mode, I will see that I have all those polygons. Right. This is probably a good starting point for doing some sculpting. If I want to do some organic modeling, some kind of eye. By changing the resolution, I can have different detail level on different parts of the model. I turn it up to 50, and it's really detailed. Back in object mode, we've come quite a long way with this model in 5 minutes. Let's explore the decimate modifier. So I think that this model is great. I'm going to post it on Thingiverse. And there are just way too many polygons, and I don't want to upload this. It will take up too much space, so people won't download it. So let's take out 90% of the polygons. It's basically the same shape. It's not very smooth. It's almost the same. But if this is 50%, it's almost exactly the same object. When I toggle this on and off, you don't see much difference between off and on. And if you look at the eye here, do you see any difference? A tiny, tiny difference. And let's crank it up to 0.1. That is how many polygons we want left. So of course, there are not many polygons here compared to before, but it's still the same shape. Very handy. Right, do you think this mesh is watertight? Let's check. So I have selected it. I click, this is the 3D printing add-on. Non-manifold edges 0. That's good. I go into edit mode and delete something. Now it's definitely not watertight. So we have a hole here, but suppose I don't know about it. Now we have 6 manifold edges. And oh, there they are. I can just press F to make a face that fills this hole. Right. Anything else you want to see? We're about ready to start with the workshop. How many are going to follow along? Well, 3, 4. Do you have a mouse?
No.
I have some spare one with the. You want one?
Yeah. Without the mouse, it was quite difficult to navigate.
You have the dongle there.
If you show how to work with dimensions, I've designed out in Inventor, which is completely different today.
Yeah.
But can you still work with dimensions in Blender?
Yes. The unit is called Blender unit, and you can choose what you want that to be. I almost always choose that one Blender unit is 1 millimeter. So if I add an object, the radius of the cube is 1 millimeter, so this is 2 millimeters big. If I want to inset this by a 0.5 millimeter, I can type 0.5 and it will inset it 1/2 millimeter. I want to now extrude it 2 millimeters. I just type instead of moving the mouse, and then you can select exactly how many Blender units you want to execute this. So if you, I type E2 and E1, E1. I can also measure how long is one of these edges, or many of them, or all of them. So this edge here is 2 millimeters long. Right. So it's by no means a CAD tool, but you can make accurate models with it. Are you prepared? No objections? Right. First, let's get rid of the light and the camera. Then you right-click the light object. You can press X and then select delete. And the same for the camera. Right-click it to select it, X to delete it, and then select delete. To select things, you can also left-click in the outliner. That was very thin. I think it's this table and my mouse are not completely friendly. So just shout if you have any questions and have trouble, follow along. If you press N with a mouse in the 3D viewport, you get this left info bar, and you can see the dimensions of your object. So this is now 2 millimeters in each dimension. I think that is going to be a good base for our model. If you select the standard cube, press Tab to go into edit mode. Does it work? I'm going to scale it up. No? It's working for you?
Yeah.
Yeah? If you right-click it. Right-click. So, did I say left-click?
You actually did.
Sorry. Blender has right-click to select since the beginning, and it's controversial, to say the least. You can switch it around in the settings. I like to use default settings, so I just got used to it. Right-click to select, and then press Tab to go into edit mode. And now we want to scale this up, so press S, X, 50. Still in edit mode, S, Y, 30. Something like that. You don't have to have these exact dimensions. If you have something selected and don't want to have it selected, you can press A. A will deselect your current selection, and when nothing is selected, you can press A again to select everything. Is it working?
Whenever check that, put on there. Create merge spaces, so you set X and then FY.
S. S for scale. SX and then type 50. Right. And you're down there. You can use the scroll wheel on the mouse to zoom in and out. Now we're going to add more detail or more geometry, not more detail. Control R and then use your mouse wheel to add more edge loops, it's called. 15, 20.
Where do you see the numbers that you refer to? Like you say 50.
Yes, I will show you.
Right, okay.
Down here. You can also just type, I want 20 edge loops. I'm going to use 16 for the long edge and for the short.
What was the shortcut for edge loops?
Control R. If we press 7 on the numeric keyboard, if you have that, you can see this from the top, and you see that it's quite a nice grid I have here. How's it going? Do you want help?
No, it's fine. It's just not like exactly like yours, but I'm sure it's fine. It's like, oh.
That's good. This is no exact science in Blender.
Yeah.
At least not if you for this model. I now switch to face selection mode, and there is a button for it here. Here we can select and edit the vertices. Here the edges, and this last button here is the faces. So switch. And then 1 for vertex, 2 for edge, and 3 for face. Now we can right-click and shift right-click to select a number of faces, but there is a better way to do this. So if we zoom into one of the corners and Alt right-click, I select this whole border around the object. So it's Alt right-click to select, and then it selects an entire ring of faces. And then we press H for hide. Now we have hidden it. If we press Tab to go into object mode, we see that we still have it, but it's just invisible in edit mode.
Alt doesn't work for me.
Sorry?
Alt click doesn't work for me.
Alt right click.
Yes, I tried both. I don't know if it's because it's in the laptop.
Sorry. I will show you. You have to when you want to select. This is called edge loop or face loop. To instruct Blender what ring I want to select, I have to click on the edge between two faces. There are actually two. Around this corner, there are actually 3 rings this ring, and this ring. Right now we want this ring. H to hide it. If we now press continue with Alt and right click on an edge between two faces. To make it even more complicated, we use Shift and Alt and right click. I have selected the entire border of the model. I continue this and divide the object into a grid like this. I can do this in other ways too. I can release Alt and just Shift click. Is it working? The trick is to get to this stage, and then the magic will happen. How's it going? So, no. It's an example. You don't have to use this model for 3D printing unless you like it. But as soon as any one of you can guess what we are going to do, you would have gotten a candy, but don't have them. Sorry. So now we press E. E is for extrude. And now it looks like this. I can move the mouse and down in the corner here you can see the amount, and it's in millimeters. So this big. Did you get it work? I'm now going to go into circle selection mode by pressing C, not said C. I have a little circle around the cursor. I will enlarge it like this, and I will double click. Middle click. the Blender is an advanced program, and so it's not that easy learning all the. Now it's right click, now it's left click, and now it's middle click. It's very flexible, and that flexibility costs in complexity. Something like this, and I can type E again, 20 this time, and I will press C again. I will remove this. And I can someone guess what this is? No? It's a pen holder.
I would have guessed IKEA furniture.
Sorry?
I would have guessed IKEA furniture.
Yeah. I have actually worked at IKEA.
With blender?
Sorry?
With blender?
No, unfortunately not. And this is a model that you can now 3D print if you want, but we can make it a bit more advanced. Let's leave edit mode for now, if you think you're ready. What do you say? Excellent. I have this object selected, and I press this wrench here for the modifiers. We're going to use the subdivision surface modifier again. Now it's a bit softer, but do you think this bottom will stick? Probably not. We need something a bit sharper at the bottom. There are a couple of options here. We can use a Boolean modifier and just cut off the model at the bottom, and that will make it completely flat. One thing that probably works, if I go back into edit mode, you find it? How's it going?
Correct.
Excellent. So back into edit mode. I now see the rounded model as well as my geometry. So I hover my mouse here, I press Ctrl R. I see that purple line there, and I press to get an edge loop. I move the mouse almost all the way down. Sorry, no, my mistake. That was incorrect. First, we're going to press Alt-H, and then we will get back the face ring we hid earlier. So we're going to zoom in on it. Can you do that? It's the mouse wheel and shift right click to pan. Here we want to make an edge loop, and we move it almost all the way to the bottom. Now this looks good. There will be a slight curve here at the bottom, but that's no problem. If we want to, we can...
Sorry, what did you do with the edge loop?
I will show you.
Oh, thank you.
I zoom way in here at the bottom corner. I just dissolve this for now. So hovering here, I create an edge loop and move it all the way to the bottom. And to show my exact, now it's a left click, and then I just move the mouse and another left click. You get it to work?
No, it's on the wrong way.
Yeah. By moving the mouse cursor around, you see the indicator here. It's changing. So I want to hover my mouse here over this edge here. Left click, move mouse down, and another left click. Worked. Right. So tab out of edit mode again. With the object selected, File, Export, STL. Pen holder. We probably only have this model. If you have multiple modules, select the one you want to export and click this selection only. Now, if I, for instance, worked with one Blender unit is a centimeter, I would have to enter a scale here of 10. Working with a very large object inside a Blender can be troublesome. So that might be an option. So then you say that one Blender unit is a centimeter, and when you export it, you scale it by 10 or any other number. You can, of course, scale it in a slicer as well. So it's now exported. Do I have a slicer? Yes. There it is. And if I press here, it says, yes, it's manifold. Did you get it to work?
Well, I made a model, but it's just slightly different.
Sorry?
I made a model, but it's just slightly different.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm happy.
If we want something a bit more fun, we can use the displacement modifier, and we will use a texture. And that texture, we want it to be clouds, and the size of those clouds should be 5. Now we have a whole different texture that is visible in the polygons. I can increase the number of polygons here.
Is this only texture or is bump map? Like it's
This is real geometry,
okay.
So it's not a bump map. The displacement modifier works with polygons. So I can export this, so kind of stone textures. Now we see one problem here, the bottom. This is not going to print. Probably have to cut it off with booleans. I think I have like 3 minutes. I don't expect you to follow along, but this is just an example. Here we see I pressed C, so then I can see this hole transparently. I see that here I added another cube. Would be tab into edit mode. Something like that. This is where we're going to do the cut. Scale it out. Scale it out. It would be like that. Boolean modifier. And I want a difference. And I want to use the carve engine. Now it has to think for a bit. Probably should turn down the number of polygons here. Currently we have almost 1 million polygons. This is not the newest of laptops.
Is this the only way to carve stuff in Blender?
No.
Like using these modifiers? Okay.
No.
Okay.
I almost always use booleans to carve the underside, because then I know it will be completely flat. There are lots of other ways to carve. Now it takes so long, so Windows decided to blur it. Right, did it actually finish? Yeah, it did. Don't use a computer with an i3 processor. Blender can take a lot of RAM also. Right, I think this concludes this presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it. A question? Yes?
How hard is it to fix broken meshes in Blender?
It depends on how badly they are broken. Blender is quite good at showing where it's broken. If there are a lot of polygons, there can be a lot of manual work, selecting each polygon, removing it, gluing faces together, and I've done it with like 1,000 errors, probably like 50 errors at a time, delete a whole bunch of errors, gluing it together, and yeah, it's not fun. I don't know if there is other tools better at it, but there are lots of different workflows to use in Blender. Say that you have a really high definition model, you can shrink wrap another mesh around it to only capture some of the detail. That could work. It depends what model it is. So, yeah. Yes?
A question. If I import a model to the slicer,
Yes?
will the slicer interpret the walls as a solid?
So let's look in the slicer here. Can we slice it? Does this answer your question? So this pink lines here is the infill. Yes, they're solid. But if we go in here and remove one of these, they're not solid anymore. But then it will be visible. Let's turn this down a bit. If I, for instance, delete this one, now it's not solid. And then it depends on the slicer how to interpret this. Some slicer just fill it in as simple as possible, but then you can have more advanced errors, and it can be any number of errors, and it can be impossible for the slicer to get it right. Yes?
Is there any kind of construction mode in Blender? I know other software have some kind of construction mode where you can measure edges and so on, so you get the millimeters of an object on one side and so on. Is there any add-on or anything you can add to Blender for this?
This is not Blender's strong point, as you might have guessed. If I, in object mode, I will always see the exact dimensions here. So this is 101.21201 millimeters along the x-axis, and it's 81 millimeters high. If we go into the model in edit mode and select an edge, I can, in the left panel here, right panel, sorry, I can under mesh display toggle the length, and I can see that they're 20 millimeters, and these are 5.882.
Yeah, that's perfect. Exactly what I was looking for.
Good. And if I want to measure something, I can just create a temporary edge with the length, like it's from that vertex to that vertex, it's 24 millimeters, but that's in space. So probably should do it like this. $35 millimeters. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And